Welcome back to Tech Vibes, where today we'll fix your Sony Bravia Android TV with a full factory reset. Start by turning on your Sony Bravia Android TV and waiting for the home screen to load. If your Sony Bravia Android TV is frozen, wait a few seconds to see if it responds. Grab your remote and point it toward the Sony Bravia Android TV. Press the home button to try opening the settings menu on your Sony Bravia Android TV. If the home button works, go to Settings at the top right of the Sony Bravia Android TV screen. Select Device Preferences inside the Sony Bravia Android TV settings. Scroll down until you find Reset on your Sony Bravia Android TV. Choose Reset and confirm Reset again on your Sony Bravia Android TV. Select Erase Everything to begin the factory reset on your Sony Bravia Android TV. Wait patiently while the Sony Bravia Android TV wipes all data and restarts. If your Sony Bravia Android TV is not responding at all, use the manual reset method. Turn off the Sony Bravia Android TV using the remote if possible. Unplug the power cable from the back of the Sony Bravia Android TV. Keep the Sony Bravia Android TV unplugged for at least 30 seconds. Press and hold the power button on the Sony Bravia Android TV while unplugged. Keep holding the power button on the Sony Bravia Android TV for 10 seconds. While holding the power button, plug the power cable back into the Sony Bravia Android TV. Continue holding the power button until the Sony logo appears on the Sony Bravia Android TV. Release the power button once the Sony Bravia Android TV enters the reset mode. Follow the on-screen instructions to continue the factory reset on the Sony Bravia Android TV. If you see a blue light blinking, wait for the Sony Bravia Android TV to process. Do not disconnect the power while the Sony Bravia Android TV is resetting. Allow several minutes for the Sony Bravia Android TV to erase all settings. Once done, the Sony Bravia Android TV will reboot automatically. When the welcome screen appears, your Sony Bravia Android TV reset is complete. Grab the remote again to start the initial setup on the Sony Bravia Android TV. Choose your language on the Sony Bravia Android TV setup menu. Connect the Sony Bravia Android TV to your Wi-Fi network. Sign in with your Google account on the Sony Bravia Android TV if needed. Adjust your picture settings on the Sony Bravia Android TV during setup. Enable apps and services you want on the Sony Bravia Android TV. If the Sony Bravia Android TV still misbehaves, repeat the reset steps carefully. Make sure no buttons are stuck on the Sony Bravia Android TV remote. Replace the remote batteries if the Sony Bravia Android TV is not responding. Check that the power cable is fully seated on the Sony Bravia Android TV. Ensure the wall outlet is providing power to the Sony Bravia Android TV. Try switching outlets if the Sony Bravia Android TV doesn't turn on. Inspect the HDMI ports on the Sony Bravia Android TV for loose connections. Unplug and replug the HDMI cable firmly into the Sony Bravia Android TV. Switch HDMI inputs on the Sony Bravia Android TV to test the signal. If the screen is black, shine a light to see if the Sony Bravia Android TV backlight is working. Reboot the Sony Bravia Android TV again by holding the power button. Keep the Sony Bravia Android TV updated to avoid future issues. Avoid unplugging the Sony Bravia Android TV during app updates. Make sure the ventilation around the Sony Bravia Android TV is clear. Overheating can slow down the Sony Bravia Android TV and cause freezes. After the reset, test apps to confirm the Sony Bravia Android TV runs smoothly. Your Sony Bravia Android TV should now be fully refreshed and working fine. Thanks for watching Tech Vibes. Enjoy your restored Sony Bravia Android TV.